end of Hulkamania, the start of a brand new era. The NWO.
Well, first of all, I'd like to wish everybody, for those of you that are religious, Happy Easter. For those of you that aren't and believe in rabbits, Happy Bunny Day. And for those of you that don't like any of the above, Happy Zombie Jesus Day.
That's what that's how Jim Cornette referred to it today. He said, "Happy Zombie Jesus Day," when he rose to tell all the bunnies it's time to go lay eggs in yards for people, for kids of all places to find the color.
Well then.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Doing all right. Have some interesting things that I've come across that we'll be doing this week, but I'll fill everybody in on that at the end of the show.
Absolutely. Mr. Michael Currents.
Well, after the introduction today by you, Chris Adams, I am actually dumber than I was when I called into the show tonight, so yay, duh. I'm having trouble breathing. Hold on. Okay, hold on. There, the intelligence is coming back now.
All right, then. I don't know
how I feel about that.
I did not mean to dumb the show down with my mute button being on, but, stuff happens sometimes. That's all we can say about that. So this week, we are going to tackle none other than the NWO, in case anybody hasn't picked up on that just yet. We got the, I don't know if we want to call it the rise and fall of the NWO, because technically it took it a bit to fall. It bounced around to several different places before it decided to call it quits and die out completely. But
would you really consider it several different places?
Well,
realistically, it was at its highest peak. It was in WCW, and they had a branch in New Japan.
They showed up temporarily in WWE. They showed up temporarily in WWE. They were realistically they were in TNA. It wasn't. I don't remember if they came out with the music or not, but it's the same bunch of guys.
They were called the Band. The Band is back together.
Yeah,
which is garbage. But anyway, so where shall we start with this? Should we start for?
How about in the beginning?
We could definitely start with the beginning. The beginning is always a great place to begin at.
In the beginning, there was the Outsiders, and they cameth unto WCW and shat upon wrestling and the wrestling fans and the evil that was the Lucifer McMahon.
Do you remember the very first start of it, though, guys? Do you remember what brought it all on?
It was contract negotiations. It was contract negotiations that Bischoff was put in control of WCW, and Ted Turner pretty much said, here's all the money in the world. Do what you want. Hire who you want. Let's make this thing big, and let's go for it. So what did he do? He did it. Contracts were coming up on two of the founding members, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and, a bone was thrown to him, so to speak. DDP reached out to both of them because DDP's friends with Eric Bischoff, and boom, they offered him a contract. They offered him a very, very big contract, and the first appearance of any signs of anything was Scott Hall coming through the crowd on Monday Nitro.
Exactly. I believe was it not a Scott Norton match on top of it, who was a future member of the NWO?
It was just I think it was Alex Wright and somebody else, or Bunkhouse Buck, or just somebody. I don't even remember who they were.
To be fair, Chris Adams, you could probably pick a name out of a hat from most of the people on the WCW roster from 96 to 2000, and they would be members of the NWO in some form or capacity.
God,
well,
that's true.
Let's try this. Why don't you pull a name out of the hat?
Disco Inferno.
He was a member.
Wait. Was he on the Red Squad?
I don't believe he was. I believe he was a black and white.
He was black and white.
He was a founding member of something. It says, I'm looking at the list of all the incarnations, and it states a founding member.
And
I knew the angle He
you were
begged
correct.
and begged and begged to be a member of the NWO, and they finally let him in. Like, he was one of the last guys in the door.
And it was not a Norton match. It was the Mauler and Steve Dahl, is what it looks like.
Yeah, not nobodies. A bunch of nobodies.
Mike Enos. It was Mike Enos. The Mauler, Mike Enos, and Steve Dahl.
Mike Enos. I haven't heard that name in forever.
It was Mike Enos or Steve Dahl, basically. And, Scott Hall comes up out of the crowd, and he jumps over there, and the people are going nuts. They see Razor Ramon in the ring all of a sudden. That's all they know him as. They don't remember him coming in before DDP years before that. All they remember is what they've seen recently. And he comes out there, and he's like, you know who I am. Everybody's like,
he never stated a name. He said, "Ayo." He said, "You know who I am." And Bischoff,
but you don't know why I'm here.
He works for them.
Yeah, and then next thing he's talking about you want a war. And then everybody's talking about, with Nitro being on Monday night, Raw being on Monday night, they were pitted against each other. All of a sudden you see the Razor Ramon from WWF showing up saying, "You want a war?" in the middle of a Nitro ring. They're thinking, what is this? Are they crossing over? Are we having some kind of dream match scenarios deal now or something? What's the deal with this? And he's up there just wreaking havoc. And then what was it? 2 weeks later that Kevin Nash shows up. Like 2 or 3 weeks later, I believe.
I think it was the following week.
Yeah.
Was it the following week? I thought it was 2 weeks.
So.
Sure.
I think it was the very next Nitro.
I think it was, but all I know is I've never seen anybody pretty much shit their pants the way Eric Bischoff did, because Scott Hall just pointed. He says, "Yeah, I got backup. Where's he at?" Oh no, it was 2 weeks later, because he says he confronted Bischoff and said, "Yeah, you'll see, he'll be here next week." And Bischoff got in his face the following week, and all Scott Hall did was point behind him, and he backed up, bumped right into Kevin Nash, turned around, and almost fell over shitting himself. He said, "This is where the big boys play, huh?" I'll never forget that infamous line.
To me, that was the greatest, at first, it was the greatest thing that happened in wrestling in a long time for me. Seeing this new thing, these two guys come over, because beforehand, you didn't see anybody openly acknowledge, and they didn't really openly acknowledge Vince McMahon, the competitor at that time to WCW, really and truly not much. I mean, they didn't come out there and just call him out by name every week and say, "Vince McMahon, we told you we're going to leave you. We're going to go to WCW. We're going to do all this stuff." They didn't run off with their gimmicks exactly. Scott Hall kept talking the same way, but he didn't use the Razor Ramon gimmick. Kevin Nash was not Diesel. He wasn't Big Daddy Cool.
Well,
but they come out there and everybody knew who they were.
Scott Hall, though, but you look at Scott Hall, and he still showed signs of the bad guy. The toothpick, the slick back hair. But then you got Kevin Nash, and he's got that long, fluffy, flowing hair. You know what I mean? He's got the baseball cap on with jeans and a T-shirt. It's not a look you're used to seeing with Diesel. With Kevin Nash, you're used to seeing him as Diesel, but Scott Hall, he still had the look of Scott Hall regardless. Well, of
he had the hair slicked back. He had the toothpick, but he didn't have the glittering vests and the bright trunks, and wasn't going by the name of Razor Ramon. He had his actual name that he was throwing out.
30 pounds of gold around his neck.
No. He gave that to Mike, and Mike wore it out that next weekend on a date or something, I heard. Mike?
Yeah,
with us? How did they go?
I'm still here.
30 pounds
when you got 30 pounds of gold around your neck, and you go out to the Red Lobster, and Mr. T sees you, you get the shit beat out of you. That's what happens.
Was it like having a midget hanging from your necklace?
It was bad. It was bad.
Ludicrous.
Just wondering.
I like that. WCW was branched in Atlanta. Ludacris is from Atlanta. Very nice.
Well, I'm good for something every now and then.
It happens. But
the formation.
It started the war. It was the outsiders. They just started showing up and beating everybody up backstage. I mean, throwing Rey Mysterio like a lawn dart, taking out Arn Anderson. I mean, they're taking guys out left and right, and it put realism into it, like plain and simple, because you're not used to seeing this kind of atmosphere with guys with ball bats just demolishing people.
No, you're not. And there was talk that when this first started out, of course, it was just the outsiders, like we're talking about. It was Nash and Hall. And I don't know if they ever had any plans at first to extend it beyond the two, but talk started happening of having a third member. And they wanted it to be somebody who was already WCW to turn and go with them, and the person was Sting. They wanted Sting to be the one to turn and be that third member, the main guy of the NWO. And so I think if I'd read correctly somewhere, Sting just couldn't bring himself to do that. He couldn't.
No,
he didn't want to be the heel or something.
Right.
Thank God they didn't.
I actually caught the interview with JBL with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and they spoke about it. They said what it was is they wanted Sting to do it. Bischoff thought it would be a great idea, but Sting, he wasn't. He didn't want it. He never wanted to be a heel, like you said. He never wanted to be a heel. And they had Hogan on the back burner. Hogan was actually at Kevin Sullivan's house at the time when all this was going down. So Hogan wasn't. When you literally seen Hogan show up, that was when he legit showed. Like, he had just got to the arena and came out. Nobody knew, and including the outsiders. Right. Nobody knew. The ball was in Hogan's court. And if Hogan would, actually, what I think it was is, if Hogan didn't want to do it, Hogan wasn't going to show up, and it was going to have to be Sting. But Hogan turned around and jumped on it and said, you know what, I'm going to do it. He finally made the decision, and he left Kevin Sullivan's house and went there and showed up and dropped the leg drop on Savage. And that's when all hell broke loose.
Oh, yeah. As if that wasn't bad enough. The following Nitro was something else. I mean, the fans trashed the ring completely.
Well, I mean, that happened in that was Bash at the Beach. It happened at, and I believe that was in June of '96. So from June, you had your three members. You had Hall, Nash, and Hogan, who then changed his name to Hollywood Hogan. The scruffy beard, everything. Now, do you guys know who the next member of the NWO was? The fourth member.
It's one of two people. Mike, you want to take a stab at it first? I got an idea who I was going to say already.
Oh, gosh, I'm trying to remember. It's been so long.
I would say, if Mike's not sure,
Was it Dusty?
No.
No, was not Dusty. Dusty didn't come until later down the line.
I'm thinking it was either the Giant or X-Pac, one of the two.
No, believe it or not, it was Ted DiBiase. Ted DiBiase joined in August of '96. Then the Giant, you had. I'm looking at the list now. You had in September of '96, you had the Giant join. You had NWO Sting. Because at that point they're trying to make everybody think, oh, Sting joined the NWO. Sting joined the NWO. You also had X-Pac joined in September of '96. You had Vincent, Virgil, join in September of '96. And then you had Miss Elizabeth join in September of '96. And Ted DiBiase was there until about mid-'97. The Giant got kicked out in December of '96. And Six was there until he got fired in '98.
I just, if they had left it at maybe a 4-man crew, like the Four Horsemen was, maybe even 5. I might even give you 5 at the most. Because when you took the Four Horsemen into consideration, they always had J.J. Dillon, right? So, I mean, I would give you 5 at the most. But when they went beyond that 4th and 5th member and kept adding on to it, that's when it just started imploding at that point. You were taking, the entire roster. I mean, it gets to be where it's no longer WCW. It truly is just the NWO show.
Well, not only that.
Go ahead, Mike.
Not only that, but what you had here with this NWO faction, even from the beginning, were too many giant egos and giant talents. when you think back of the Four Horsemen, what made it successful was you had Flair, the biggest ego of them all, and then you had his little, smaller egos that followed him around and were his backup. Not the NWO. The NWO was just, they were all Flair until, how most of them were all Flairs. And then they started just getting minions that didn't really matter.
Right, but you look at it this way. I mean, from the initial start, all the way, within the first few months of 96, okay, you get, like I said, you got Hall, Nash, Hogan, DiBiase, who was there until mid-97. You got the Giant, who was kicked out in December. NWO Sting, Six, Vincent, Miss Elizabeth. Then, in November of 96, which I thought was a great twist, and I think they did very well, Eric Bischoff joined in November of 96. You had Buff Bagwell, which I thought was great in the NWO. He needed it. When he was running around as the American Males with him and Scotty Riggs, it didn't work. I mean, it worked for what it was worth, the little gigolos, but then when he started running with that's when his career really took off. Then you had Michael Wallstreet, which for those who don't know was Mike Rotundo, a.k.a. IRS, joined in December of 96. You had Big Bubba Rogers, which was, Ray Traylor, a.k.a., the Big Boss Man. He joined in December of 96. You had Scott Norton, who was a member of Fire and Ice, which was, their tag team. He joined in December of 96. And then you got Masahiro Chono, who joined in December of 96. That was just in 96 that joined. And I would love to talk about the 96 guys, before we branch into 97, but that's who you got. And I think out of all of them, the ones that really flourished because of joining the NWO at that time was Scott Norton and Buff Bagwell. Everybody else, I mean, you already had names. You already had Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Hogan. Like I said, the list goes on. You had established guys. So the ones that really, Michael Wallstreet and Bubba Rogers, or Big Bubba, flopped in the NWO. They didn't fit at all, which they were contractually removed from the group in April of 97, both of them. So, like I said, the two that flourished at that time, that made their career, was Buff Bagwell and Scott Norton.
Yes, but you know what else it did?
What's that?
It saved and gave Hogan in his career more life than it ever would have had if he had just stayed as the Hulkster.
Oh, it was the greatest heel turn in history. There's no doubt about it.
To me, that is the one thing that the NWO accomplished in doing above anything else, was extend the life of Hogan's in-ring career.
Well, I would have to say he was at a not quite a brick wall as a red and yellow. He wasn't quite there yet, but I mean he was definitely
at a crossroads.
On the way. He's at a crossroads for sure, because he's at a point where it's like, what else can I possibly do as this character? It's been done. He's done everything he could do. He was on top for a lot of years in the WWF. He comes there, he goes to the top pretty much right away in WCW. I mean,
well, you have to look at it this way. His career, he'd already been wrestling at this point in his career probably 20 years, because you got to remember, he
22
to 22. He came in 74.
He was in the early 70s for sure. I know he was in Memphis in the early 70s as him and Beefcake, the Boulder Brothers.
I thought he started the latter end of the 70s when he was managed by Freddie Blassie.
He was around before then. He was in Memphis before that for sure. No doubt.
So regardless,
because in Memphis he was there with Ed Boulder. Well, with Ed Leslie, and they were called as the Boulder Brothers for a while.
Right. All right. So regardless, he had already been in the industry for 20 years. He'd already been running Hulkamania for since '82. So he's been running it for 14 years.
Somewhere around that, pretty much, yeah.
So he needed it.
Mm-hmm.
But then now
Oh,
you're
yeah.
getting in 1997 now. February of 97, you get the Macho Man. March of 97 until July of 97, you get Dennis Rodman. May of 97, you get the Great Muta. May of 97, you get Tenzin. July of 97, you get Conan. September of 97, you get Kurt Hennig. November of 97, you get Ravishing Rick Rude. So once again, you're getting branched into these established guys. Conan had already been there. He was already established. I don't need to speak for the other guys. Tenzin, I don't really recall him, but Muta was already huge in Japan. Dennis Rodman, that was already celebrity status. You've already got Savage, Hennig, and Rude.
Was there another guy from Japan other than Tenzin and the other one?
There were Great Muta, Masahiro Chono, who showed up in December of '96. So by the end of 1997, you've got 3 Japanese guys in there: Masahiro Chono, Great Muta, and Tenzin.
And that's more or less just for their reach to New Japan, for the most part, most likely, just so for their reach to there, to make their presence known. I mean, they had that. It's like the Road Warriors, if you think about it, and they're not a big group like they were, but even when they weren't there, they had the people that tagged with them in New Japan Wrestling as well. You get the same thing, I guess, kind of like it's kind of like the modern day. We said this before though with the Bullet Club. It's like the modern day NWO. They got people spread out through Ring of Honor, and they got them in Japan. If you want to count the guys in WWE, you can, I guess. They're not officially Bullet Club, but it's like representation everywhere for your group.
Right. Now, 1998, you get. Well, don't forget, 96, you also got referee Nick Patrick. He had joined then. And then 1998, you end up getting. Now, not many people noticed this or knew this. You got Louis Spicolli. Louis Spicolli joined in January of '98 as a valet for Scott Hall, but then he died, a few weeks later. You had Dusty Rhodes, who joined in January of '98, which not many people realize, but when the NWO had split up, Dusty Rhodes joined the Wolfpack side. You had Brian Adams, who joined in February of '98. You had the Disciple, who joined in February of '98. You had Scott Steiner, who joined in February of '98. So you have all of those in '98 alone, and then you also get Bret Hart.
At one point, it was almost like the who's who, basically, to be in the group. Hogan, Nash.
And then it was the anyone.
And then anyone, just anyone. But
yeah.
Exactly.
Right, because now you're breaking
guys.
it up, because then you have the NWO Black and White, and then you end up with the NWO Wolfpack. So then you have, which the NWO Black and White was called the B Team. You ended up with Stevie Ray in August of '98, Horace Hogan in October of '98, Barry Windham at one point. Then you had the Wolfpack. You had Lex Luger in May of '98. You had Sting in June of '98. Disco Inferno. You had David Flair join, and he was there for like a month. You ended up with Rick Steiner, but he never actually fully joined. You got Jeff Jarrett, who ended up becoming a founding member, so to speak, of when everybody restarted doing it. You had Ron and Don, the Harris brothers. I mean, it was just. So here's what you had. You had the New World Order from the NWO from July 7th of 1996 to April of 1998. You had NWO Hollywood, which was April of '98 to January 4th of 1999. Yeah, 1999. You had NWO Wolfpack, which was May 4th of '98 to January 4th of 1999. You had NWO Elite, which was January 4th of '99 to April of '99. You had NWO Black and White, which was January 7th of 99 to August of 99. Then you had the NWO 2000, which was a silver instead of white. And then they used the catchphrase, "The band is back together," which is where the band came into play in TNA. Because you got to remember, Jeff Jarrett was there and everything like that. And then that was 99 to 2000. And then you had celebrities that were in there. Kyle Petty, Paul Gilmartin from Dinner and a Movie. You know, you had, like I said, Dennis Rodman. You had Claude Mann, who was the Dinner and the Movie chef. It was getting ridiculous, and that's not even counting the.
It got ridiculous well before then, though.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but there were a total in their existence as a group, and that's not counting. You know, and if you want to go as far as counting the WWE, WWF, you know, Hogan, Hall, Nash, X-Pac, Shawn Michaels, Booker T, Big Show.
Well, Big Show was already an NWO member as the Giant, so you can't count him twice.
But I'm just saying that's the WWE version, you know. And then you had New Japan. You had Masahiro Chono, you had Hiro Saito, you had Hiroyoshi Tenzin, Scott Norton, Buff Bagwell, NWO Sting, The Great Muta, Michael Wallstreet, Six, Hall Nash, Tatsuyoshi Goto, Mikayoshi Ohara. You had the Big Tight, Akira, Bryan Adams, and Satoshi Kojima. So between all of them combined, all the incarnations, the whole nine, you've had 62 members of the NWO.
That's pitiful.
That's a whole. I think that's more than what's already on the current WWE roster, including NXT.
It was stupid. I mean, so many people. You just had. There's no real purpose or reason to have that many people in that one formation. I would love, right now, at this very second, I mean, honestly, to have Kevin Nash in front of us just to ask, was it meant to get away like that with that many people? Was it originally meant to expand so far out, or was that the result of just stupid writers? I just want to know that. Because it was so perfect. It was so perfect when it started out, just being the three of them, and adding one or two more would have been great. And then you could have had some great feuds between them and a WCW stable or the Four Horsemen. But the Four Horsemen would have been a great feud with them for the simple fact that it was no longer Arn, Tully, Barry, and Flair. You had to settle for Flair and Arn and Mongo and whoever their fourth replacement was at the time. You
had Dean Malenko left. You had Benoit. Yeah, so it was Benoit, Mongo, Anderson, and Flair. And then when Benoit branched out of there, you had Jeff Jarrett in there. And then at one point it was supposed to be Kurt Hennig.
But see, why'd they go that far with the Horsemen at that point? They should have just disbanded the Horsemen altogether. Because to me, you took a legendary foursome and you made it a joke for a while there by just playing Ring Around the Rosie for the fourth member. Even the third and fourth member at one point. You know, it's just as bad sometimes as when I look back at the NWO. I'd much rather them disbanded and let them go their single ways. Let Arn Anderson stay in the Dangerous Alliance or something. That would have been something fun to see. The Dangerous Alliance taking on, the NWO. But they were both heel groups. You wouldn't have seen that anyway. But I want to throw some names at you guys, okay, that are a part of it. And you tell me what their real purpose was. Because I can't see and understand any real purpose for some of these people to have even had a part in that group. And the first one that comes to mind, you mentioned earlier, was Michael Wallstreet. What is the big deal? Why would Michael Wallstreet even make an impact in that group of people they had going on?
I think at that point, if you look at the names of the people that I brought up, A lot of it was your 80s guys, early 90s guys. They were guys that were impactful at one point in WWE, well, WWF back then. You know, especially in the 90s era. IRS was an impactful guy. He was a big name in that time frame in WWF.
Do you think it was a shot at WWF?
Vincent. I think it was, considering, you know, like I said, the guys that they were bringing in. And then they started, you know, bringing in the WCW guys. But it was more of, you know, a kick to the face, you know, saying, ha ha, Vince, we have your guys.
All right, Mike.
He was there to collect a paycheck and to aggravate Vince McMahon. Everything that WCW did in the early 90s was to piss off. Why do you think Virgil's name was Vincent? Why do you think Barry Windham's name changed to Shane?
I never thought about Virgil's name going to Vincent, to be honest with you. I never looked at it that way, but that is very ironic.
It was a blatant slap to Vince McMahon.
That's why I was asking you guys if you think it was a shot at McMahon by putting IRS or Michael Wall Street in there. And then you had Ted DiBiase, and then with Virgil or Vincent. And when did they change? You said Barry Windham's name. It was calling him Shane?
I'm pretty sure that at a point in time, maybe it wasn't Barry Windham.
I don't recall.
No, I don't recall that part. Now, I've been wrong with
Barry Windham
ever
changed. The only time he ever changed his name was when he went back to WWE and became the Stalker.
And that was
been
pretty
Barry
pitiful
Windham,
too.
even when he was with the Blackjack. He was Blackjack Windham.
I definitely don't remember a Shane part though. I don't remember that.
No.
Now another name for you guys, Bubba Rogers. I mean, at the time,
no impact.
No impact on the group at all. Now, I read something a few moments ago when you were talking. I was looking some things up, but they talked about how Michael Wall Street and Big Bubba Rogers were almost immediately out as soon as they were in due to contractual obligations or contractual issues.
Right. They were there for about 5 months. And if you remember, when did Boss Man show back up in WWE? Mid-'97.
Yeah.
You know, and Michael Wall Street, Mike Rotundo, started working as an agent for WWE.
Now, if it's one thing I can understand Macho Man going, okay? Because you're talking about big iconic names from WWE. You think Hogan, you think Nash and Hall, you definitely think Savage. That's got to be a given.
Right.
I didn't have any question about that. I never even questioned Six showing up and going there. Which is funny, then eventually going to X-Pac. But I didn't have any question of that because of the whole tie-in with the 1, 2, 3 Kid Razor Ramon bit.
The Click.
I got that as well. The Click, exactly. I get that. But then you got names, once again. All right, Scott Norton. I never thought Scott Norton really fit in at all. To me, he didn't fit in. Just like I didn't think Wall Street did.
I felt he did because he was the muscle. He was the
they had plenty of muscle to go around.
He was right, but he was what you would call the brick wall. Especially when, you know, the Giant was out. Yeah, you had Kevin Nash, but you're not going to make the leader the brick wall. So you need to bring someone else in as the enforcer because, you know, their fucking bodyguard, their fucking, you know, Vincent was garbage.
Well, you know, Soul Train Jones hadn't been a wrestler for quite a while. He had to be the man that flashed the cash for the $1 Million Man. He's done lost his touch in the ring. Only so much he could do at that time. But
I mean, it was impactful because you look at it. How many careers did the NWO literally skyrocket? Buff Bagwell, Scott Norton. I mean, Scott Norton is a former IWGP champion.
But to me, though, Scott Norton was bigger in New Japan Wrestling than he was anywhere else. I never felt he was big in WCW, even when he was in NWO. I didn't think much of him.
What about Buff Bagwell?
What's he doing now?
Who, Bagwell or Norton?
Bagwell, he's a jig. Norton, last I see Norton was at Wrestle Kingdom 11 in the Battle Royal. And he's still a monster.
What's Bagwell?
He's still doing
When's the last time Bagwell wrestled?
Meaningfully or wrestled?
Yes, meaningfully. Meaningfully.
A while.
TNA for a little bit, but it didn't last long. I know he showed up in WWE after WCW got bought up, but
for like
his
five
attitude
seconds.
backstage sucked. Yeah, his attitude back. He had one match, and that was against Booker T, and then he was shit canned.
Exactly.
So you know what? It didn't do a damn thing for his career. It didn't do a damn thing for his career because nobody's going to care.
But it reinvented him for the WCW at least. Now, when he was in WCW, it's not like he didn't have a career already anyway. He teamed with Del Wilkes, the Patriot, for a while.
He also teamed with Scotty Riggs as the American
Riggs,
and they were former tag champion.
He was also a decent individual guy when he got there and wrestled on his own when he first hit the ring there as a young guy, as a babyface. He was decent and got some decent pushes at that point then. So it's not like his career was dead. It's just that it reinvented him to something different and allowed him to bring more of his personality out that he really has.
But you look at it this way: it reinvented, Hogan's career. It reinvented Savage's career. It helped skyrocket the Giant. It really did. Yeah, the Giant was there. The Giant was a champion. But when the NWO, he got involved in the NWO thing, it helped skyrocket. All right. Not only that, but we all know if it wasn't for the NWO, DDP wouldn't be DDP. Okay.
That part's true. They're the ones that gave him the first real chance to push himself out.
And the feud between him and Savage was feud of the year in '97.
Mm-hmm.
That just kept going on, and it was great, And it even caused Sting to reinvent himself, which made him bigger than ever.
Did he really reinvent himself?
He kind of did. When he stopped picking up the mic, when he started doing, sitting in the rafters, being the lone man, nobody knew what side he was on, because his technical Stinger persona, with the colorful face paint and the colorful everything, it was getting stale, and it was getting stale quick.
It kind of was. I had to agree with that because there was no more things between him and the Horsemen anymore. That was what kept Sting alive for so long, was his feud, long-standing feud with the Horsemen.
Right.
And that had gone to like a wall altogether, hit a wall, and it was no more.
And then he had the stuff going on between Luger, Savage, and him, with the arguments around Fall Brawl and War Games and Starrcade and everything like that it just, there was nothing else for him.
Well, I got something else to throw at you guys here as far as meaningless people. All right, I'm not even going to touch the celebrities. You guys already know what I feel like about celebrities in wrestling. All right, I hate the celebrity wing and the WWE thing. Celebrities, they belong in their area. The wrestlers belong in theirs. But when it comes to Nick Patrick, all right, Nick, you're pulling in your own referee. It's like hadn't that been done already with the whole Flair get his own referee guy, the blonde-headed dude? I can't, Charles Robinson or something like that. I mean, why? I mean, you're bringing in your own referee. You're bringing in other individuals that had no real meaningful stuff to the wrestling itself. They're more like behind-the-scenes kind of things. The Bischoff thing I get, because it looks like, it made it look like he was in with him from the get-go, and he worked the people the whole time to bring them in. That was the kind of lure from that. It was.
And
that was a good
him
twist.
In the ring with his, and seeing him kick there with his bike in the middle of the ring with the jacket and the NWO shirt was just gold.
But the whole thing with the referees and such, I mean, that seemed stupid, and that's why it started getting meaningless to me, that they started bringing all these people in. When they brought in the likes of other people who were legends in WWF, you got Bret Hart coming over and joining up with them eventually. Rick Rude was a part of it. I mean, come on. I mean, how many people do you need to get that group over? The group is already over.
I will never forget when Rick Rude showed up on Monday Night Raw. That was back when WWE was still recording Raw and showing recorded Raws. And you seen him on Raw with DX. And that night he walked out with the NWO. And because I remember watching, I'm like, DX, Rick Rude. I used to flip back and forth because I remember Nitro used to be on from 8 to Raw used to be on from 8 to 10. or no, I'm sorry, Nitro was on from 8 till 10, and then Raw was on from, 9 to 11. So I would watch the first hour of Nitro. I would flip back and forth for an hour, depending on what matches were going on or what promos were going on. And then from 10 to 11, I would watch Raw. So, I remember seeing Rude on, and then flipping the channel, and then holy shit, there's Rude. I'm like, what the hell is going on?
It was crazy stuff, to say the least. I mean, Mike, I want to ask you a question, get your opinion on this. What do you think would have happened if WCW had actually opened the doors and greeted D-Generation X outside the Coliseum the night when they were doing a show there? Because they said they knew they were out there. What do you think would have come of that if they had actually confronted that and put it on there?
Before you say anything, a lot of them didn't know because Kevin Nash turned around and said he looked outside, seen Hunter. Jericho walked by, Nash was about to open the door and let him in, and there was a lot of people that did not know. Jericho didn't. They just were just like, what the hell's going on? What are they doing here? They were serious.
That was crazy, Mike. I think we have lost Michael for a moment. Mr. Currents is on standby.
Well, while we're waiting on Mr. Currents to get back, because he's probably going to have to call from his phone, I'm looking at the championships right now. Just the New Japan, the IWGP Heavyweight Championship at NWO hands has been won 3 times. Norton, Kenji Muto, and Masahiro Chono, 3-time tag team champions. The G1 Tag League, Super Great Tag League twice. The feud of the year, Bischoff McMahon. Comeback of the year, Hollywood Hogan. But that was for 2002. Match of the year, they're counting all that shit. Titles. WCW World Championship, 8 times. Bret Hart once, Kevin Nash twice, Savage once. I actually forgot Savage was a world champion under the banner of the NWO. Hogan 4-time. 6 was a Cruiserweight champion. WCW World Television champion. Scott Hall, Scott Steiner, and Conan. And not for nothing, but that reinvigorated Conan's career as well. WCW United States Championship 9 times. Hennig once, Hart 3 times, Hall once, Luger once, Steiner once, Jarrett twice. WCW Tag Team Championships 10 times. 5 times as the Outsiders. Sting and the Giant once, Sting and Nash once, Hall and the Giant once, Ron and Don Harris twice. War Games 3 times, the Giant in 96, Hall in 97, and Nash in 98. They have won. Plus, you've got to see, a feud rekindled. You got to see the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan again in 1998. You got to see Piper and Hogan again in 1997.
Looks like we got Mike back with us again. I see his mic's back on. Mike, what about the thing I asked you earlier before you went away for a second there? What if they had opened the doors and let D-Generation X in, or confronted them on the show live when they did that?
Probably one of 2 things would have happened if they would have actually opened the doors. DX would have turned around and went home and looked really, really foolish, or they would have rolled down into the arena, which I doubt Vince would have let them do. And every single TV would have flipped to WCW Monday Nitro. Do I think it would have had a long-term impact on where we are now as far as the wrestling business goes? No, because the reason the WCW failed was because Ted Turner threw money around like hookers throw their ass. So it would have all came down to it would have run out of money eventually anyway. So
see, I can disagree with that. I really can, because Bischoff has already stated he wanted to let them in. He was willing to let them in. He wanted it. He welcomed it. because, like you said, he knew that if that would have happened, and on Raw, but in the same turn, it wouldn't have mattered because I think Bischoff would have let WWE's cameras in as well. You know, it would have been.
It wouldn't have mattered if he did.
It would have been ECW, WWE all over again. It would have been a straight up invasion.
What I think would have happened out of it,
nobody would have known what to do with it.
What I think would have happened, I think Mike hit the nail on the head a moment ago about the channels, the channels changing though. If they had showed that, if they had let them in, and you're right, he did say that he was about to welcome that idea. I've heard him say that before. If they had done that and welcomed them in, and if they had announced it on WWF that DX was invading Nitro, all the channels would have turned to go see what was going on.
Would they have just let DX in without their cameras? I think they would have let the cameras in as well.
It wouldn't have mattered. Because the WCW had more cameras, had better cameras.
They had all the angles. They had all the angles,
exactly.
More cameras and camera angles. If the WWE had got to come in with their cameras and got to show it on their deal, the people who were there live might have got to see it, but the people at home watching it might have said, hey, I want to see what it looks like from the other angle. I want to see what's going on there. And flip the station and go over there and take a look at it. And that would have been stealing some of your viewers, just like when they tried to ruin WWE and say that Mick Foley had just won the belt that night. And everybody turned and watched that. And they lost viewers that night. That was just such a terrible move.
Yeah, see, I was about to say that. That would have just been, basically, would have been payback for that. And, see, WCW put the nail in their coffin when they announced that. As soon as they announced that, I think that's when Raw started winning the wars. Plain and simple. But you know, if WCW would have let them in, and I honestly feel that, you know, DX, if they would have been allowed to come in, I think they would have went in because they didn't know what was going to happen. You know,
Vince would have never let him in. Vince would have never let him in.
I don't think Vince would have. I don't think Vince would have done it either. From a business standpoint, that would have been wrong. That would have been hard on them.
It would have been a huge liability for Vince's guys to go in there, especially in that time and era, because they could have had their ass beat down by the company guys, legitimately.
And I don't know if that would have happened or not. But friends aside, even though if Nash and Hall were friends with Hunter and the other guys that were out there, friends or not, I mean, I don't think that would have. I don't think it would have benefited WWE in any way business-wise. So that's why I don't think Vince McMahon would have anything to do with it.
No, because they were there. They were there to show that the WCW had to give away tickets. They were there to make fun of the WCW, to paint them as a company that was afraid. They were afraid of the competition, so they weren't going to let them in. And the moment those doors opened, it would have been turned around and gone.
Right, but in the same aspect, like you said, friend, Waltman was already there at one point, so Waltman had friends backstage. Okay, so I don't think anybody would have touched him personally. They would have played it out, you know, they would have did the hits and everything like that, but I don't think they would have physically did harm to him. Same thing with Hunter. Hunter still had some people back there he was cool with, you know, i.e., you know, DDP, Hall, Nash, you know, other guys that when he was running around as Terrorizing and when he started wrestling as Paul Levesque. You know, I don't think that anybody would have touched him. Now, Billy Gunn being the hothead that he is, you know what I mean, and Road Dogg being the way he is, they might have beat them up, and not to mention, I don't think anybody would have had the balls to try to hit China. So I think it would have just ended up being a stalemate. It would have just been like, oh shit, now we're backstage, what do we do?
I don't think there'd been a fight regardless between the two, real or fake anyway. I don't think they would have gone that far with it. I just think it would have shown some type of invasion angle that would have been kind of stupid to do. Like I said, business-wise, it would have killed them anyway. But the only thing that saved the NWO for the longest time was when they started having trouble within, and we ended up getting this from it. To me, that's the only thing that saved it. Because when you had them break up into the Wolfpack and the Black and White against each other, that just worked out a whole lot better to me.
Right,
if
but if
people
you
started
think about it,
cheering
though,
more, they would go crazy for the Wolfpack people.
Right, but think of it this way: realistically, how would it have been a dumb idea? Because when you had ECW around in WWE, they had guys show up on ECW. They had guys show up on WWE.
It's a dumb idea for them because it'd been done already. That's why it would have been a dumb idea. You don't want to keep rehashing the same stuff, even though they're known for doing it. You don't want to keep rehashing the same stuff over and over and over and over again. The
two biggest companies.
Still doesn't matter. I mean, it wouldn't have been good. Look what it did for ECW.
Yeah, and the WWE and the ECW guys was an angle worked by the companies, so it makes sense. It makes sense when you exchange that talent to help. This would make zero sense because you're going against the company. You're going against your direct competition.
But there's no talent.
Right.
There's no talent.
Against your direct competition.
Right.
Yeah, there may not be a talent exchange, but you're going against your direct competition.
But it's not a true invasion, though. It's not a true invasion.
It's not an angle that they're working. This would have just been his people going in to the arena, showing up, and I agree with Chris. Every single person watching the WWE Monday Night Raw would have turned the channel to WCW.
But look at it this way: if they would have went in, okay, and it became huge. It was already huge. The fact that they were knocking at the door. WCW didn't even acknowledge the fact that they were there, but WWE acknowledged the fact that they were there. If it would have been acknowledged, I guarantee you a phone would have been picked up and said, you know what, we might not like each other. No, we wouldn't like each other at all. But can you imagine the money to be made on a one-time pay-per-view for bragging rights, even if it turns into something once a year, a mega supercard, at the time, WWF versus WCW. Could you imagine the bank accounts? Everybody, because then not only are you going to get, it wouldn't be the whole, okay, well, now you're going to have WCW guys only watching WCW. You only got WWE guys only watching, WWF guys only watching WWF. You're going to have people flip-flop back and forth all the time. But now you're just combining, and it's like, oh, shit, now we have all these viewers, from every brand, tuning in at the same time at the same thing. The ratings would have been through the roof, okay? The people's pockets would have been lined with money. Vince would have benefited from it. Turner would have benefited from it, okay? It would have been something you could have had, your world champ, Hogan at the time, against your world champ, which was Austin at the time, or whoever it would have been at the time, You could have had.
They were never going to do that, though. That would never have happened.
Yeah, but could you imagine? I'm right.
We could imagine. Well, we could imagine all day long and talk about the what ifs and the ifs and buts. I mean, but if ifs and buts were fruits and nuts, I guess everybody would be happy. It's just it wouldn't have worked out that way business wise. I mean, we'll have to agree to disagree on this one for the most part, because there's no way I'm going to agree with this one at all on it.
Listen, we're not eating trail mix, okay? So you can take your fruits and nuts and. Yeah.
Yeah, you know it. Jump over to the Wolfpack part though, because the Wolfpack part's when it started getting more interesting. When they started fighting each other and tearing up from within. At least that kind of it didn't restart the whole fad for it again, but at least it was a little bit of a twist. At least, and it kind of saved that angle for a little bit longer, where they could stretch it out meaningfully. When you had these two, when you had the two big groups burst up from within and take each other on. Unfortunately, not too long after that, they flip-flopped all over again, because you had people from Black and White now joining back up with the Wolfpack, and Wolfpack people who were there flipping back to the other side again. It's like it became a merry-go-round.
Guys that were kicked out, brought back in. The Giant was kicked out and he was brought back in. And
Mike, if you had to say one thing, although the Wolfpack, do you think that all right? Let me start with it this way, Mike. Do you think the Wolfpack idea going up against the Black and White was a good angle they had, or should they just can the whole NWO gimmick at that point and not really move forward so strongly with it at that point at all? It just kind of just slowly let it fizzle out.
Honestly, I think it was the only course of action they had at that point. The NWO was huge. Wasn't there a point where really the only people fighting were like Larry Zbyszko and some other people that didn't really matter?
Larry Zbyszko, Roddy Piper, DDP, and I think Dusty were the last four, weren't they?
The old and the useless.
Well, I'm sorry, Sting.
I mean,
Sting went to the Wolfpack. So I mean,
yeah.
You had the old and
the useless versus
Goldberg.
Yeah,
Zbyszko wasn't in the NWO.
Who was it?
Zbyszko wasn't in there. You had
exactly. That's what we're saying. We're saying
who was left in WCW.
At this time, the only thing left in WCW was Goldberg and some old dudes that didn't.
No. Whoa, hold up.
Oh, yeah.
Back up.
DDP would still be an old dude too, technically, if you think about it.
DDP was an old dude.
Getting into it all.
He was still wet behind the ears, so to speak, at that point. But no,
he was a new wrestler, but he was an old dude.
Whoa,
yeah, exactly.
Back up, rewind, take it back a notch. You had plenty of guys down there. You still had Rey Mysterio. You still had the whole Cruiserweight division. You had Benoit. You had the Four Horsemen. You had Booker T. You had Raven's Flock. You had, the Filthy Animals. Goldberg. You still had.
Of all
DDT.
the people that you've mentioned, Goldberg at the time was the only one that mattered. None of the rest of them mattered.
As far as WCW was concerned, who they pushed, he was the only one that mattered at that point.
When you stack them against the members that were NWO, none of them mattered worth a shit.
But look,
you still had Flair. You still had the Four Horsemen. You still had.
But
you had Booker T.
Here's how it was working out, though. Here's how it was working out. Each week, if the Horsemen came out, they put up a bit of a fight, but they were getting slaughtered because it was like 9 against 4. And it was getting really old to watch, because anytime if you were a WCW fan and you had any hope for any of your WCW guys to step up and do something good, it was always squashed 9-4, 10-4, 11-4, or 10-2.
And you know what, Chris Adams?
It was always squashed out there. And then
one of my theories on why the NWO got so big was because it happened while nobody was watching. Because Goldberg was what everybody was watching. He was unstoppable from 97 clear till, it was like a year or more, wasn't it? His streak.
I don't remember how long for sure.
Let's be real with this, okay? Goldberg was not 180-0, okay? Because every damn week it seemed like the numbers went up and up and up. And we know damn well, and we spoke about this before, we know damn well that there was no road schedule in WCW like what the WWE had. Okay?
That's actually been discussed by other people before too. Some people that were behind the scenes there. It was kind of a running joke in a way, because they made it sound bigger than what it was at one point, and that was brought up where the numbers were inflated to make it sound good along the way that things were happening like that. So that definitely was an inflated number. I don't know what it actually was.
Right.
But it's not about the number, it's about the time. It's about the period of time when everyone was focused on Bill Goldberg. And it allowed the NWO to grow and swell because they didn't give a fuck. They didn't care. They didn't care how many people were joining the NWO. All they cared about was who was next. And by the time it was all over with, everybody that was next was in the NWO.
Right, but then you also had the LWO, the Latino World Order.
Who cares?
Right, that's what I was going with too. That's where I was headed with it a moment ago when we were talking about when you brought up the Horsemen and all that people. All we got from this was a bit of humor. We got the Latino World Order. You had the Blue World Order, and I think they were in ECW there.
The BWO was fucking great. All right, I don't want to hear anybody's shit.
I'm sorry.
That shit in Times
I like
Square
Stevie
and
Richards.
Santa Claus was great.
I like Stevie Richards. The Blue Meanie was entertaining. And who was the third person in it?
Nova, Supernova.
I mean, to me, I don't even remember Supernova. That's how important he was to me. But the idea of the Blue World Order was just a humor sketch, and it was funny when they did it. I got it. The LWO, Latino World Order, it was meant to be a funny spinoff, if anything, making fun of the New World Order. Even Ricky Morton jumped in on it and made a T-shirt that said MWO for Mullet World Order, just to get a T-shirt sale. I mean, it was all about merchandising at that point. They had no one group-wise that could stand up to them at all because they took over the entire show every time, and that was one of the things that killed off anybody's interest in watching Nitro or Thunder as far as that goes, or anything that was WCW related, because every time you tried to watch it, you had one slim hope that Diamond Dallas Page would come out and pull a quick one on somebody. Roddy Piper was getting beat down weekly. Ric Flair and the Horsemen getting beat down weekly. Dusty Rhodes flip-flops over to black and white NWO. You got no one left that's really meaningful to the company except Sting. And then finally, Sting comes back around a little bit, but it's too little too late because the crowd's done took to DDP, and DDP's the new hero. He's the new hero for WCW at that point. And then they go and get stupid, and I'm not saying this is related to the NWO, then they go and get stupid and bring in David Arquette and throw the belt on him.
They went full retard.
Dennis Rodman and Karl Malone coming into the picture. I'm not big on celebrities getting in the ring, you know that. Jay Leno, chin and all, if he could have stayed out, it would have been great. It was just,
you know what? I'll tell you what. But I'll tell you what. When they did what they did on the Jay Leno show, on Late Night with Jay Leno, or the Tonight Show, I mean, was what I feel. Yeah, you had wrestling and it was known and everything, but when Hogan was on, the Tonight Show, when they brought DDP on there and everything, when they did what they did, that really, I feel at that point, put wrestling into mainstream spotlight.
Lawler Kaufman, David Letterman.
I think it was bigger than that.
Oh no!
It's just a repeat.
It's
an old story rehashed and redone.
It happened 20 years later. That's the only reason you feel it has more impact, because you were actually alive.
Different generation.
But not everybody knew who Jerry Lawler was, because he was just from Mid-South Wrestling.
Yes, they did, because everybody knew who Andy Kaufman was. So they all knew who Jerry Lawler was after the Andy Kaufman incident. If they didn't know him before, they knew him after.
I get what he's saying. I get what he's saying.
Knew
but
who Hogan was.
What that did, going to the Letterman show, what that did for that, though, was it did make wrestling in general hit a hot streak for it. Not just Memphis. Memphis was selling out the Memphis Coliseum, 20,000 plus seats every Monday night. They were selling out the Nashville Fairgrounds. They were selling out the Louisville Gardens. They were selling out in Evansville. They were selling out everywhere they went to during the week. And even the little spot show where they showed about during the week, they weren't hurting for ticket sales at all down there. So they didn't really benefit from it any more than what they already had. What did benefit from it more were some of the smaller places, or places that weren't getting as much television exposure or anything else like that. Like the AWA started getting bigger on ESPN. The World Class Wrestling got a TV contract and got on there and started benefiting more because they wanted to see what was going on down there for the world to see. You had more people getting brought to the forefront and getting out there with the WCW or NWA at the time, actually, on NWA Saturday night with a 2-hour TBS show. Things started pouring out more and more and more because wrestling got brought to the forefront on national television on David Letterman by some little small comedian and some hillbilly from Tennessee that no one knew of at the time, with the slap heard around the world on David Letterman. And that got that all started. And then 20 years later, when the new generation comes, now they rinse and repeat it for the new generation, and it happens with DDP and Hogan and everything.
Right, but now wrestling is so mainstream now that it's everywhere. Which you reminded me of something, of Thunder. I actually liked that. I actually enjoyed Thunder, and I remember the video game, which was really cool. But I'm surprised the network hasn't started putting Thunder on there yet.
I don't know. Well, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of Thunder. Even when it was on, I didn't watch it very much.
Yeah, I did, because it was another night of wrestling.
Oh, Christopher, I finally figured out where I got the Shane reference from, and I knew I read it somewhere, and because I had to go and actually Google, WCW stabs at Vince McMahon, and it was after Vincent left the NWO. I mean, you're on the verge of collapse when you can't keep Virgil, and he joined the West Texas Rednecks, which was Kurt Hennig and Barry Windham. That's where I got the reference to Barry Windham. And then Vincent changed his name 2 times during that stint, once to Curly Bill and later to Shane.
Curly Bill.
And then later to Shane.
Okay, I did not remember that at all. I do remember the group. I remember them doing that, but I did not remember.
Yeah, because they had that song "Rap is Crap."
Yeah.
Rap is crap.
But you know that your faction is ready to die when Virgil packs up like the rat he is and flees that sinking ship.
All right, so look, let's skip ahead a little bit because I want to get some current week news in as well before we end the show tonight and everything, since we're doing roundtable talk. Skip ahead to WWE. The NWO is resurfacing back in the WWE. Vince McMahon brings them back over there. Now, can you really call that? Can you really call that a resurfacing of that group? Because it was not done very well at all.
Let's get this straight, okay? When Vince bought WCW, he fucked it up already. When they turn around and, okay, the Invasion pay-per-view, cool, great idea, awesome, WCW guys versus WWE guys. But then you're going to make the team that they made? No, you need to have guys like DDP on there. You need to have, Booker T, Goldberg. You should have had these big caliber names that were already in there if you're going to put them up against your big caliber guys like Austin, Kane, The Rock, and everything like that, okay? Now, when they brought the NWO in, we're going to inject some poison in it. Okay, that was kind of cool if they were going to do that. All right. But then you bring them in the way you did. Everybody already knew who they were, and they brought them in WWE's storyline structure. They should have let them come in the way that they did in WCW and run Ruckshaw, or however you want to say, run rampant, okay?
Right.
And then Mania, they didn't utilize Kevin Nash at Mania, okay? They want to say he had a quad injury or a knee injury. I watched that Mania. He was moving around quite all right, okay? You turn around, you have Austin against Scott Hall with Kevin Nash in his corner. Turn it into a tag match, okay, if you want to do it that way. You have The Rock against Hogan, which will by far go down as one of the biggest pops I've ever seen, and it forced Hogan to change face again. Then you bring a guy in like Shawn Michaels. Look, now I'm huge on Shawn Michaels. He's my icon, okay? But you bring him into it when he's not even wrestling. You bring Booker T into it, and then turn around and basically make a racial joke out of it, saying, oh, something sticks out here, and you kick the only fucking black guy in the NWO out, all right? You bring back X-Pac, who he's still X-Pac when he was 6 in the NWO, okay? It was a joke. It was the biggest joke in the world. I don't even remember how it ended. I think they were trying to bring Triple H into it, and that one year, and Nash was out, and Hall got drunk, and X-Pac was doing his own thing, and it disintegrated before our eyes, and nobody knew what the hell was going on. I think it lasted maybe 6 months.
We did get something good out of it, though. We got one of the best Kane promos he ever did on Monday Night Raw. I know you guys remember it. Mike, tell me you don't remember that. I know you do. Kane got up there and does imitation. He does imitation of Hulk Hogan.
Canaanite.
The Canaanite. Oh, are you serious? You don't know it? Mike, you've got to look it up.
I know it. I'm just sitting here shaking my head.
I started to say that was some of the best stuff I've ever heard them do. Kane do. It cracked me up when he talked about the Canaanites and the millions and the millions. The whole thing just cracked me up. I mean, you gotta get a good laugh out of it, if anything. Right. Bringing them all back brought that at least.
Right, but if anything, you're going to bring them in. If you're going to bring the NWO in, bring them in when you're doing the invasion angle. Bring them in when you're doing WCW versus WWE. Okay? Do it that way. Don't bring them in, what was it, 2 years later or some shit like that, or a year later or whatever it was when, the invasion angle's done and everything. They did it wrong. They could have been good, but the timing was wrong. And like I said, they tried to bring Triple H into it. So what? You were trying to get the entire clique to basically be the NWO plus the Big Show?
And then to turn around, they turn around in TNA and bring, quote unquote, as you said earlier, the band back together again by having them all brought in there. And I can't help but think that when they did that in TNA, that just started to become a bigger downfall to TNA than what it was when they brought all them in together again. And a lot of people back, if you remember, a lot of people back in the day used to think that Eric Bischoff and Hogan were the reason why WCW fell apart. And then all the truth started coming out. But at the same time, they went to TNA, and the way they wanted to do business there didn't quite work out so great for them either. And it was like they were taking what they had done in WCW a little bit and brought it there and tried to pull it off there, and no one was buying.
Right, but here's the thing, and I always say this. It was the inmates running the asylum. That's what was the downfall of WCW, plain and simple. You had Kevin Nash booking himself to win the world title. It was just the finger poke of doom, okay? It was ridiculous. The bullshit that happened when Hogan showed up and Jarrett just laid down and let Hogan win. And a lot of people have to say that it was Vince Russo. You look when WCW failed, okay? Vince Russo was there. You look when TNA was at Dixie Carter's era wasn't even the lowest point when they almost went bankrupt. And I'll even say it. It was when Vince Russo was there. It was failing miserably. Either Vince Russo is still being paid by the WWE, by Vince McMahon, to basically go in and just destroy anything he touches, or he's either the greatest genius or he's the biggest failure. I haven't decided
You bring
yet.
up something good there, and I want to ask you guys individually this. I want both your answers on this. Michael, we'll start with you here. Vince Russo. When he was in WWE, was it the Attitude Era, right? That Vince Russo was there. When Vince Russo was there, Mike, and he was doing the writing along with Ed Ferreira, I think it was, and a couple other guys. We had some great stuff coming out of there. He leaves eventually, goes to WCW. Monday Night Wars are happening. They got some good stuff going on Nitro. We get all this good stuff happening. WCW starts taking the lead in the Monday Night Wars. They're beating Vince McMahon. And then all of a sudden, a few things go bad, and like Russo's tossed under the bus. Do you truly believe Vince Russo is a bad writer, bad person to book things like that, or do you think he just got the shaft by the companies and the fans, basically?
Hell, I think he got the shit end of the stick in a lot of ways. And no matter how great you are at writing and storytelling and booking, eventually you run out of new shit. You get old and you get set in your ways, and the shit that used to work 10 years ago no longer works, and you're too damn stubborn to get over it. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a little bit of both of him and the companies. And, WCW, it failed because they spent too much money. They were paying these people exorbitant amounts of money.
That was the Jim Herd thing you're talking about, right? The one about the no. I'm sorry. You're talking about the contracts, because before the contracts even started, the whole money problem had started before the contracts with Jim Herd and his excessive spending on all this. They were doing before that leading up to the contracts.
Right. That was just the tip of the iceberg. Jim Herd's little spending issues. Because let's face it, Ted Turner was filthy frickin' rich.
Mm-hmm. But he wasn't putting all his money in WCW either, though.
Well, he didn't have to. He had enough money not to.
He also owned the Atlanta Braves as well, and he owned Turner Broadcasting Network.
Right, but as far as letting WCW fail, he wasn't throwing all his money into that pot.
Right.
And going to keep it afloat. He's only going to do so much for it and let that be it. And when the money starts going in the wrong direction because you're throwing too much money at certain talents and not enough at some others, because let's face it, they didn't plan for the future. If they planned for the future, they would have kept Benoit, Malenko, Guerrero. They would have kept Mysterio there longer. They would have kept Jericho. They would have kept some of these people who left and made a bigger name for themselves in the other company.
But they didn't see the value in them. They didn't see the value in them because they still had.
Mysterio didn't leave. Mysterio was there until the end. He just happened to show up in WWE 3 years later.
But still, though, you know what I'm trying to say, though. I mean, they didn't really do anything to keep him there at that point either. They didn't throw a lot of money at him. They threw a ton of money at Luger. And I'm not saying Luger wasn't a good wrestler to watch. I always enjoyed Luger. Some people didn't. I did. But I mean,
he was old.
But they threw a lot of money his way when they should have put some money his way and some more money this other way. One thing I want to do, though, I want to go ahead here for a second. I don't want to say I don't want to wrap up the whole NWO talk altogether because it was a great.
Wait. Before you go to where you're going, I want to bring something up about Vince Russo because I know you went to Mike first.
I'm sorry, I forgot to say about that. Yeah, go ahead about Russo. What is your take on Russo?
I agree. Everything recycles. You know, they say every 17 years. You look at clothing. Clothing recycles. You know, I mean, you look like Mike would know because Mike, look when we were in high school. What was it? It was the flare pants, right, for girls to wear, right? Which is basically the same as bell bottoms in the 70s. Okay, now it's all skinny jeans. It's just basically a tighter version of what people wore in the 80s. They're bringing back high waist and stuff. You look at movies. Movies are being recycled. Shit's being rebooted. Shit's being remade. Okay? You look at music. They're starting to take the tone now back to the older sounds. You know, everything you do comes full circle. So even like you said, Chris, when you had Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman, well, now you got Hogan and, Jay Leno. You know what I mean? And now even today, you had what? Jon Stewart and John Cena, okay? Everything gets recycled, whether it's a faction, whether in wrestling, whether it's a faction, it's a storyline, whatever it is. Vince Russo was literally the man between him and Shawn Michaels and Triple H, okay? Vince Russo was basically the brain power behind the Attitude Era, all right? And in that short period of time, when he leaves and goes over to WCW, well, you can't recycle something that was just used 2 years ago. You can't use angles and storylines that were once used less than 5 years ago. So now you're stuck at a position where, well, what do you do? What can you do? Now you're just trying to throw shit together. Viagra on a pole match, fucking Judy Bagwell on a forklift match, okay? And then they're taking, the hardcore division after WWF turned around and put its trademark on it. Well, ECW technically put their trademark on it, but now now you have all the money in the world to give these people these big, huge contracts because they don't care. You're letting the inmates run the prison, so there's only so much that you can literally do. And as far as WCW is concerned, WCW had the opportunity to have longevity. They did, even after it started faltering with all the bullshit with Russo there and Jarrett there and, the ass end of everything. When Time Warner was selling it, all right, when Ted Turner was selling it, Warner Brothers bought up Time Warner, all right, but I believe it was Warner Brothers or AOL, one of them, that turned around and said, we don't want pro wrestling on our channels. They were already signed for another 3 years to keep going. So they would have been going until about 2003, 2004. But again, the problem was the people that bought up the contracts for the actual television companies turned around and said, no, we don't want this on our stations, which is what caused them to not have a backing anymore. And that's when Vince turned around and said, you know what, now's my opportunity to strike. Now I'm going to go in there and buy it up for pennies on the dollar and do what I want with it. And it was sad because there were a lot of guys that should have been brought over that either A, didn't want nothing to do with Vince because of the fact that, hey, we worked for him before, we had issues, we don't want to go this route again. There were guys that never worked for him that were very questionable, guys like Sting, okay, that just didn't want to go there because of, the way he had heard and felt that his character was going to be turned into, or he was going to be brought in as a completely different gimmick. But then you have guys that were brought in that were phenomenal, like Mark Jindrak and Sean Stasiak and Chuck Palumbo. They were great in WCW for what they were, But then you end up with guys like DDP. And we mentioned this before, You take guys like DDP, who was at a pivotal point in his career, all right, now he goes over to WWE and he's a stalker. It's right. Exactly. It's Dusty Rhodes all over again. All right.
Shouldn't expect anything different, really, when it comes to McMahon bringing a WCW guy over. It was always to poke fun at them and put them in a different position where they weren't successful and see if you can make something out of it. Right. It's like Terry Taylor was supposed to be the first Mr. Perfect. They made him the Red Rooster instead.
Right. You turn around and you look. When Vince got guys like Guerrero and Malenko and Benoit and Perry Saturn, and Chris Jericho and The Big Show, and they were getting these guys that were coming over when WCW was still together, was still, afloat, so to speak, all right? They used them properly because they could use them as ammo against the competition. Well, now the competition's gone. These guys want contracts. These guys need a job. Because when there was still competition, these guys could have gone, they could have went back to WCW and said, you know what, we'll deal with the bullshit. We don't want to work for the other guy. But now that there is no competition, well, now you want a job. Now you're going to do what they want you to do, whether you like it or not. And that's what it came down to. And that's the problem. Vince Russo, and I kind of sidetracked myself, but Vince Russo was left in a situation where he couldn't recycle anything because of the fact of the matter that it was still fresh in everybody's mind, and everybody would turn around and say, you stole that from the WWF.
Right. Now, like I said, I don't think get too far away from the NWO because it was a good faction and it was great talking about them. I mean, it's always a fun thing to discuss them and debate them and everything because they could go on for hours on end. But we got some things this week to get brought up on here, too, though, we got to cover as well.
You forgot the pivotal point of the NWO.
Yeah, but if we go there, we'll waste the next 35 minutes talking about it. That's all we got left.
No. I was just going to say, you finally got to see DX versus the NWO at WrestleMania when they buried Sting.
That's why I didn't bring that up. It was the dumbest thing ever. It proved no point. That proved no point. Some of the things we got this week that's kind of popped out there, a bunch of people, and it's not like this is brand new information as far as what's going on, but a lot of fans are making a big stink out of it because it involves an announcer that they like. I personally wasn't that big on this announcer. I don't know how you guys felt about it. But what I'm going to do here is do what we did a couple weeks ago. I'm going to call on you guys one at a time. That way we don't step on each other and everything. And I'm going to get your opinion on a couple of things, 2 or 3 things in the news from this week, and see what you guys think of it. So hold on one second while we get set up here. And I'm going to call on you guys individually to talk about this. The first thing is JBL. Because JBL is brought up again, of course, with the bullying situation. It's not a big news. It's been going on. It's been brought up by quite a few people in the past. It's been said he's been knocked out by quite a few people in the past as well for his antics he's tried to do, and he's taken some sucker punches at people. But the announcer on SmackDown, Mauro Ranallo, I believe is his name, apparently there was rumors going around at first he was sick, and that's why he wasn't on there. If I understand correctly, there was some bullying situation going on, they're saying, between JBL and him. And I think he's got a lawsuit up against him that they're talking about in the background here and everything. So, Mike, I want to get your point here in just a second, but I'm going to go ahead and just throw mine out here first before I get you on here. Personally, I side with JBL on this one, not because I think it's okay for him to bully anybody, but for the simple fact that I think stuff like this should be handled from within. You got plenty of guys there. If Mauro Ranallo is not able to handle himself against him, he can talk to one of the guys to talk to him. And if that doesn't get him the respect he wants, do what Jim Cornette said, pull out the old Louisville Slugger or the first tire iron you see and tear into his knees and let him know you're going to do it before you do it if he don't start treating you with more respect. But that's how I look at it as well. I can help but agree with him. Mike, what do you think how should Mauro Ranallo should have handled the situation, do you think, or the WWE in general?
Well, if you haven't noticed, Ranallo hasn't said really anything. Nothing. Openly to anyone about it. And
right.
Do you know why, Chris? Do you know why?
Tell me.
Because his contract has a non-disclosure agreement with it. If he opens his fat mouth, he doesn't get paid. So, that's exactly why he's not saying anything. And you know what? This is wrestling. This is professional wrestling. You are in a world full of alpha males. This is what alpha males do. They have big egos. They do hazing. They do ribbing. Ribbing and hazing has been going on since professional wrestling has been a thing. Now, I understand Pro is not a wrestler, never has been a wrestler, but this is the world that he chose to work in. And I'm sure people told him, coming in, you got to watch JBL. He will rib you. He will haze you. Yada, yada, yada. If you do not have the mental acumen and toughness to do it, don't do it. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, you shouldn't have to worry about it, and blah, 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 blah. If you want to watch professional wrestling full of beta males, then you can go watch a male figure skating, because that's what you're going to get.
Well, that's pretty much true, Mike. And it's the whole thing with this, talking about how the whole alpha male bit. You got that. Kind of hit the nail on the head. There's a bunch of people that say, they're the man. They're the man. You can't mess with them. I'm the man. And to rib one of the announcers, it's not like it hasn't been done in the past. But people like JR has stood up to some of the guys and let them know what was up. Managers like Cornette in the past have stood up to people and let them know what was going on. It can be done with him as well. He just has to be able to stand up and do it and everything. I understand the fans. They got, they might, have a soft spot in their heart for him. And plus, they talk about WWE having their anti-bully campaign thing that they do. And Ray, if they're going to have an anti-bully campaign going on, a lot of people say they should stick with it and enforce it against JBL primarily to start with, to make an example. What do you think?
See, here's the deal. It isn't a lawsuit that Mauro's doing. WWE's out. There's not a non-disclosure contract in his current contract about he can't say things that's going on, because people say it all the time. Whether it's Twitter battles, whatever it is, people say shit all the time. Okay, but it's the WWE willing to pay Mauro to not open his mouth. It has nothing to do with his contract. It has nothing to do with a lawsuit. All right. Now, the whole JBL bullying thing, Justin Roberts has already stated in his book. Johnny Mundo, okay, for those that don't know who that is, and for those that live under a rock, Johnny Mundo is John Morrison, okay? He has already stated that JBL has turned around and asked Eminem, which was Joey Mercury and John Morrison at the time, Johnny Nitro, okay, to take Justin Roberts' passport out of his bag, all right, and they refused to. Vince McMahon turned around and even said to Justin Roberts, maybe next time you won't forget your passport, ribbing him, okay? The Miz has already stated that JBL hazed him out of the locker room. This isn't the first reports and the first time hearing that JBL has done this. JBL is a repeat offender when it comes to bullying. You want to advocate and support a non-bullying situation. Be a star. Don't bully. Stand up to bullies. All right? Don't have somebody in the spotlight that's notorious for bullying people. There are people in the crowd now holding up signs that says JBL's a bully. And you know what the WWE is doing? They're having these people escorted out of the building, whether they bought a ticket, which they have to in order to get into the event, but they hold a sign up that says JBL is a bully, and they throw them out of the building. You have fans chanting CM Punk. You have back when Hogan was calling people the N-word, okay, when all that went down. And I'm not going to say it on air, even though we're in Rated R show. I'm not dropping that bomb, okay? But when all of that went down, if somebody showed up at a live event a televised event dressed as Hulk Hogan, they put him on the boom side so you can't see him on camera. All right? Don't eject the fan. Take his sign. Move him to the other side. He paid for his ticket. He paid to have his voice and his signage to do whatever he wants because he is a paying customer. People like that are what puts the money in Vince McMahon's pocket. People like that are what put the money in assholes' pockets like JBL. All right? I, for one, stand by, more of Ronaldo and what's going on. And it's absurd for that to continue going on. It's not the first time, and it won't be the last time, and I can guarantee it.
Well, I think you're pretty much right on that as well. Like I said, I like hearing both sides of the story. I'm not necessarily for I stated earlier what I was about and everything. I wanted to see. I think that more Ronaldo should stand up to him, or at least just let him know he don't appreciate the way he's being treated and everything. And he may have done it for all I know. I don't have a way of knowing for certain. But that is something that's been talked about a lot this week, and it's been a big source of several Twitter battles just between everyday people, not just, others. You had a big thing this week also that's happened, Alberto El Patron. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the man was drunk, and he was on video calling Triple H out, telling him that he's a sissy, telling him that he's nothing, that the only thing he did was just marry well, and that was all, that he would kick his tail any day of the week, and he was nothing. I mean, just literally calling him out, telling him, at one point he said, I don't even have to be drunk to tell you that you're nothing. You just married well, that's all you did. You're worthless, basically. He has absolutely zero respect for him. Or the company, WWE, at that point, as far as that goes, Mike, because he says that the WWE is well known for treating people of different colors not quite the same way. And that's been kind of shown in the past by some of the talent that they had that should have gone further than what they did. Mike, are you there?
Was there a question in that, Chris?
I'm sorry, I was just leading up to you, sir. Leading up to you.
I thought you were asking me a question, and I was waiting for you to actually complete your thought.
Kind of making the point of Alberto El Patron and what he's saying. Just making the point of what he says and how they say WWE doesn't treat people all the same. He's Hispanic. He doesn't get the same rights as some of the other wrestlers or the same pushes, things like that. And how he's calling Triple H out on the video and telling him what he thinks of him and everything.
Well, it really must be hard to be having the midlife crisis that Alberto Patron is having. You find out that your girlfriend, who, whatever she is, has a very assorted sexual history, including threesomes with the power of positivity. You basically, got kicked out of the biggest job you'll ever have in the wrestling business. So you're going to drink a little bit and you're going to blame everybody else but yourself. Sorry, Alberto. You fucked the dog on this one.
Right, and that's where I'm getting at. He wants to sit there and say that, they have an issue with people of different cultures. Okay? That, I guess, in his opinion, that WWE is a white man's business. But you got guys like The Rock, multiple-time champion in every aspect. All right? You've gotten Ahmed Johnson, who was an Intercontinental Champion. You've gotten Ezekiel Jackson, was an Intercontinental Champion. All right? You have, hold on. Who was one of the greatest Hispanic wrestlers in Eddie fucking Guerrero. Okay? One of the biggest, and now I don't know if it was due to the fact that it's his lineage, but Del Rio or Patron, whatever you want to call him nowadays, his uncle was Mil Mascaras, or his grandfather, whoever it was. And then you've got Rey Mysterio Jr. It's not that they don't push these guys, they do. But everybody knows that there's been a long history of a love-hate relationship between Triple H and Del Rio, Alberto El Patron. Okay? There's backstage heat, legit backstage heat between the two. And he's just not happy. Yeah, he didn't get his push the way he wanted the first time, and he left. And he faltered, and he got nowhere. All right? So they bring him back to one of the biggest pops that I think he'd ever received when he showed up at Hell in a Cell and won the United States Championship off John Cena. But what? Because he didn't get his World Heavyweight Championship, like he didn't in the time frame. Okay, he hadn't even been there a year, and he's going to bitch about it. And like Mike said, maybe he's having a midlife crisis because he realizes that, oh, I don't know, his fiance is a whore. Who knows? But she's young. She's 22 years old. What 22-year-olds do you know that haven't slept around quite a few times? I'm just saying, okay? But there's a history there between him and Triple H, and that they don't like each other. And with Triple H being the next in line to run that company, and he's in Vince's ear, of course Vince is going to turn around and sit there and say, you know what, you're right. But what I find hilarious is that El Patron wants to sit there and say all this shit about Triple H. I seen the video that Triple H posted. Oh, whose office is bigger, Stephanie's or Triple H's? It's not the size of the office, it's how you use the office, if you catch my drift. Now, I don't know if anybody saw the video, but if you didn't, I'll gladly send it to you. But Del Rio just needs to get off his high horse and quit his bitching, because right now he's at a company that is starting to come back up now that it's back under the reins of Jeff Jarrett. And he's the world champion the first night he shows up. Yeah, he gave the belt away, but then he got the belt back. So now he's already a 2-time TNA champion. The guy needs to stop his bitching. Oh, wait, and he also wrestles for the promotion that's owned by his soon-to-be in-laws. Get off your fucking high horse. I digress.
And then to go ahead and to tie the two together, guys, and I got you both off. You're both. I'm sorry. You're both on now, not on mute anymore. But to kind of tie the two together here, Alberto El Patron also came out defending JBL, says he has nothing but respect for him, as if to say he never had any issue with him in the back or anything like that, that he didn't see any troubles with him or anything. I don't know. Patron does strike me though as the kind of guy. Like we were talking earlier when Mike mentioned the whole thing about alpha males in the locker room and everything. And I don't believe Patron ever had a ton of respect for a lot of the talent in the back either anyway, because he always felt like they weren't respecting him. So I guess that can kind of go either way with that. But I want to throw one more thing at you guys. We got like 20 minutes left, and we won't talk the whole 20 minutes on this anyway. There was I forget the name of the podcast radio show. They were at a signing with Jake the Snake Roberts, and they were asking him about Roman Reigns and the heat that he gets, and what would he advise him on, for example. I put this on Facebook earlier, and I think I tagged you to it, I'm not sure. But they asked him, he said on what he told Roman Reigns regarding the current heel heat he receives and everything, he says, enjoy it. He says, enjoy it. He said, why in God's name would you change what the masses are wanting? The masses want to hate him. Let him enjoy it. He said, I'd tell him go in there. He said, let them hate me as long as they're paying me to do it. He says, pull their hair, gouge their eye, poke them in the butt. I don't care what you do to make them mad. Just keep them mad. Keep them booing. Keep bringing in the money. I mean, is that not pretty much what they're doing right now anyway? I mean, WWE is running with it, and they keep pushing him at the top. Even though he gets booed tremendously, they're still running. They're running away with it right now. And it's kind of like one of Ray's guest said the other day, Mike, if you didn't get to hear this yet, I believe it was Shane Taylor. He said all the internet people out there who were complaining and booing him aren't the ones who are there buying the merchandise at the table. They're not the ones spending the money on all those tickets for a family of 4 or 5 to get in, buying the T-shirts, the foam fingers, or whatever, and all the other good stuff. It's them people whose opinions really matter to this point. And if they want to buy all that stuff and still boo him, more power to him at that point. So, I mean, if you were Roman Reigns yourself, Mike, would you not just be eating this up right now and thinking how great this would, I mean, or are you worried that this is staining your legacy of some sort for the future and everything?
If I'm Roman Reigns, I'm going to kick back and make money. I don't give a damn.
Either way it goes. I mean, you're whether you're booed or cheered, you're making the money hand over fist at this point with your merchandise and appearances and everything.
The wrestling business has changed so dramatically here, even in the last 10 years. Roman has his gimmick. He just goes and he does what he's told. He is the epitome of a yes man. If Vince McMahon would tell him to go out there and wrap himself in shit-stained toilet paper, he would do it.
I saw a picture online of like the shot from WrestleMania, Ray, where it looked like he had just beat The Undertaker. And the caption read, "That look you have when you realize you're the most hated man in WWE history now." Do you think he'll go down, if he's not there already, as being the most hated wrestler to ever be in the WWE?
It's a pretty close call. I mean, you got to look back at Slaughter back in '89. You know, Slaughter was having death letters sent to his house. They legit had to have Secret Service, police, everything guarding his house because, him and his family feared. And it's one of those things. It's a real tough call. Roman said this flat out. And if it's the picture I think you're talking about, is it the one where he's sitting there backstage with his head down?
No, not that one. It's he's in the ring still. He just got the win, it looks like, and he's just kind of staring out in the crowd like, man, what have I done? It's
right.
one of those kind of looks. Not the one I know the one you're talking about as well, but it's not that one.
Right. Well, my thing is this. All right. Roman said it, and he said it best. And we know I'm not a Roman Reigns guy because I still say that when the Shield was together, everybody said that he's going to end up being the man. And now that he is, everybody hates it with a passion. Whether you're cheering or whether you're booing, at the end of the match, your ass is out of that seat. Plain and simple. And the WWE, everybody says, turn Roman heel, turn Roman heel. Do you people, and when I say you people, I don't mean you, Chris, or you, Mike. I mean you people as the fans that are listening. Do you not realize that you guys have already made him a heel? You don't need WWE to turn him heel. You guys already did it for him. You guys already did it for everybody. By constant booing, by the constant fuck you Roman, go away Roman. When, Braun Strowman destroys Roman Reigns and the fans, you can backstage, and from the arena, you can hear the fans saying, you deserve it, as it's being done. And as he's being taken off in an ambulance, they're all chanting, na, 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 hey, 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 goodbye. The fans have already declared Roman Reigns a heel, and he's going to continue being a heel, whether you make him a face or whether you make him a heel. The only way it's going to change the crowd is if you legitimize him as a heel in storylines, and he, somewhere down along the line, has a huge face turn when the fans are tired of him being a heel. Plain and simple.
Yep, and I got one more thing I want to bring up here. For example, now, Ray, you were a part of this the other day. I know you've seen it, and you had put your comments on it as well. Mike, I don't know. I don't think you get on Twitter, so you probably didn't witness this or hear much about it. I told you guys about it, though, as far as the whole Brandy Rhodes, Cody Rhodes, Joey Ryan thing going on. So you guys know of Joey Ryan and his claim to fame in wrestling. It's not Lucha Underground and what he's done there. No, his claim to fame is somebody grabs his junk and he flexes at them, and it's like they're automatically in pain because his junk is turning the pain back on them. And then at one point, he'll swivel it. Yeah, he'll just kind of swivel his hips a little bit and suplex them. So it's like the penis flex or something. I don't know what he calls it. But for crying out loud, that is like the dumbest thing next to wrestling the blow-up doll that I've seen him and Kenny Omega both do. It is dumb as can be.
The 9-year-old?
Yes, unless that was one of those Make-A-Wish things. That's just stupid to have on there, in my opinion. Just like the Hardys bringing their kid on there and doing that thing with their kid to whoever it was they did it to on TNA. Stuff like that is stupid.
It's Joey Ryan's excuse to have hot women wrestlers touch his junk.
Pretty much, and it's dumb. And look here, Mike. Since you're not on there and you weren't in a part of the conversation with it, Brandy Rhodes. That is her name, right? Brandy Rhodes?
Yes, Brandy Rhodes, formerly known as Ian Styles from WWE as a ring announcer.
Yes, she is like taking up for the guy, basically, saying that all these people are out there, they're either liking his comment, or for all the wrestlers who are liking the hate comments against him. I guess should be ashamed of him. So I don't remember word for word verbatim what it was, but Cody Rhodes jumped in on it and said that all those guys who were checking or who were clicking like on it, he guaranteed that not a single one of them drew a dime in wrestling anywhere. They're people who don't even know how to get up there and work a crowd or anything. And I made the comment on it.
Are you sure that was Cody that said that?
Yes, it was Cody Rhodes on there that had said that one part. It's like I said, it's not verbatim or anything like that, but he did say some things on there in reference to that. So I jump in on there and I make mention that although it's now considered sports entertainment, most of us would like to hold on, to the wrestling aspect of it. She fires back at me personally and says I should not use the word most when expressing my personal opinion. Now, Mike, am I wrong here? Do you have not heard 1,000 people online complain about the stupid antics that is the flip him over with his junk or the fake stuff that they had where they were the whole slow motion grenade bit that some tag team did on the indie somewhere. It's really stupid stuff. There's no wrestling involved with it. I mean, how can you defend something like that?
You can't. I mean, obviously she has a thing for him, and that's all it is. But I will say this. It is no worse than half the shit we got in the Attitude Era. Goldust's entire first run, his gimmick was horrible. As much as I love the Goldust character now, Goldust with Marlena and the cigar and his love affair with Razor Ramon.
Yeah, but they weren't doing stuff like flexing, like someone's grabbing their junk while they're flexing them, like they're transferring the pain to them.
But there was still the junk grabbing, and there was still the antics. It was a little bit, not the same. Not the same, but not really all that different either.
Hey, let's not forget, Mae Young gave birth to a hand.
Oh gosh, don't bring that up. We know that.
Jesus. All right, that's it. Ray, it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, well.
The hand thing. Come on, man. I wish they don't. Why they even do that? Really? Why?
And she even went. And she went topless at the Royal Rumble, so the world got to see all that.
Well, you gotta remember, what did I put under there, though, Chris? Whether it's pro wrestling or it's sports entertainment, it's still entertainment either way you look at it.
Yeah, one's just better entertainment than the other.
But what had happened was people were talking about how it's not it lacked a wrestling aspect, in which it does. It lacks a wrestling aspect, and that's where she was trying to defend it and say no, basically that there was a wrestling aspect to it. They just don't like it because of what the things he's pulling off and doing. The crowd's finding it entertaining, and they're cheering him at the crowd. But I mean, it's not a wrestling related kind of thing. If it was wrestling related, you'd have guys doing the junk toss every day, every week on Monday Night Raw.
Listen,
it's just not something that's
I can understand if you grab his junk for a few seconds. All right, it happened. But you got your hand on his junk for a couple minutes. All right,
holding on to it, guys and girls both.
Yeah. So no, there's a problem there. You know what I mean? But it is what it is. And I can't disregard Brandy Rhodes because she took a hell of a bump. And I showed you that against Joey Ryan where she got impaled into the fucking thumbtacks.
Right, and she took a great bump, and she has her own opinion she's entitled to. I'm not taking nothing away from her. It's just that when you tell one person, don't use most when you're speaking your personal opinion. I'm not trying to speak for thousands of people, but anybody who can read and gets online and sees all the stuff that's on there talking bad about him for what he does, it doesn't take a genius to say most is a close word, or like I said, how about just a lot in quotations, because will that be better? A lot of people do say it. It's not just me that says that. A lot of people agree with it and go forward with it. She's just taking up for a friend, I guess. Maybe they're friends. I don't know. And I do think he did pretty decently in Lucha Underground when he was there. I don't remember him pulling that same stunt in Lucha Underground where he did the jump toss.
He had a completely different gimmick style in Lucha Underground. Not totally different, but he he is actually a very entertaining wrestler, and he's actually a pretty damn good wrestler.
Right.
Watching
And he knows he can wrestle.
From Lucha.
He knows how to do other stuff. Obviously, he can do it. Why not do it everywhere else? Why pull that stunt out time to time in places like that and go and run with it? I mean, I don't understand.
I don't know unless these promoters are contacting him like, now listen here, Joey Ryan, I want you on my show, but you got to do the jump stuff.
Right, it'll never fly in WWE. But speaking of WWE, I want to bring something up. I don't know if you guys caught NXT this past Wednesday night.
What was the main event? I think I did.
It was Oney Lorcan versus Drew McIntyre.
Okay, no, I saw McIntyre's entrance, and I got a call come in, and I had to stop, so I didn't get to see that whole match. I saw the entrance, though.
If you guys get a chance, watch that match. I mean, it was I have never seen Drew move like that in WWE. You know, it was one hell of a match. And for a guy like Oney Lorcan, who just the night before had a match against Rich Swann on 205 Live, you know, which I think they're going to transition Oney Lorcan's up to the cruiserweights. But if you get a chance, watch it. But that's not the main thing that I want to talk about. Because granted, you know, Drew McIntyre said he could have gone anywhere. You know, when he left and he said this on NXT, when he was let go, he could have gone anywhere. You know, he went all around the world, and he staked his claim at every opportunity to gold there was. He could have gone up and to face the Raw talent or lay the smackdown on people. But he chose to come to NXT because that's where all the athletes are. And that's what he stated. He's making a point that he's coming for Bobby Roode. And I think that's going to be the next – I really think that that's what's going to happen at TakeOver Brooklyn, is it's going to be Bobby Roode versus Drew Galloway. Well, Drew McIntyre. And there was DIY was in a match against some guy that looked like a broken Seth Rollins. And this big monster of a man, his name was Dylan Miley. I mean, let's put it this way. He was a nice guy, shook Tommaso Ciampa's hand, okay, at the start of the match. The match goes on. I mean, this guy is bullying these guys. I mean, he's huge. He's as big as Strowman, but more cut. You know what I mean? And he's a monster of a man, so to speak. And he tags in his partner. His partner gets beat up. His partner, you know, causes them to lose. Well, Tommaso Ciampa turns around and, like, knees this guy out of the ring so he can't get in to break up the count. He starts to come back in, and they realize this, and they put their hands up like, whoa, 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 we don't have a problem with you. Hold on. Whoa. DIY wins it. DIY loses. I mean, they leave the ring. This guy gets in the ring and just literally destroys his tag team partner. I mean, he just picks him up from off the guy's back. The partner's on his back on the mat. Picks him up by his head and just lifts him up and slams him down repeatedly. This is going to be the next monster that's going to be brought up eventually. So if you guys get the chance, take a look. It is really, like, it's something. And then
I'll have to go back and look at it for sure. I usually watch it, but I miss it.
Josh Matthews is gone. He is no longer on the announce team. Team Matthews lost against Team Borash.
Now, is that the best they can come up with for storylines right now?
Right now it is, because I think Jeff Jarrett's just tired of, you know, Josh Matthews. I think Josh Matthews should come as a manager role, realistically, because if he's going to have an ego that fucking big, why not give him that mic? Why not give him a manager position? Look what happened to the last person that had a huge fucking ego, Paul Heyman. Ended up being one of the best mic men in the business.
That's true. That's true.
You know
I mean, I haven't got to see much of Impact lately. I haven't kept up with it too much, except what I see online for spoilers and stuff. And not really spoilers, but recap, I should say. I see the recaps of some of the stuff. I haven't paid much attention to it. There's nothing really going on that's making me want to watch it, like I was hoping there would be when he took it back over again. They've been kind of lacking in that area. So One more thing I'm going to point out here. We get down to about a little over 2.5 minutes here. But Shelton Benjamin apparently is returning to the ring now, it looks like. So it says here, as noted several weeks ago, Shelton Benjamin, who was supposed to return to WWE before suffering a torn rotator cuff, noted on Twitter he has been cleared to return to the ring. He will be working for the BCW promotion on 421, it says here in Ellis Lodge in Queens, New York. So it might be a matter of time. If that was to go through, we may see Shelton Benjamin make his return after all. I haven't heard any more word about it yet.
Down in
but
Texas as well.
Right. I believe it's that thing that Lance Hoyt's doing. I believe 429. The show Lance Hoyt's haven't done there. He's gonna be a part of that. I don't know if he's wrestling or if he's just showing up making an appearance. I don't know which.
Who, Lance or Shelton? Because Lance Hoyt's on the shelf until probably at least. Okay. And that not only is Shelton going to be wrestling there, but we're going to have our my spotlight guest for Wednesday, Keith Lee, is also going to be wrestling that event.
Right, now Keith Lee, Mike, if you haven't seen Keith Lee, look him up on YouTube. Man, that dude is huge and he can move.
Let's put it this way. Picture a guy as big as Braun Strowman moving around the ring like a cruiserweight. He's being like monkey flipped or something and flips over onto his feet. He's doing dives over the top rope on people. Not just dives, corkscrew dives. Corkscrew dives.
I mean, he's got the whole thing. He's got it going on. I mean, I don't know if he's going to do the same thing Shane Taylor did and stick around to places like Ring of Honor or whatever. But he's got potential easily to be NXT or someone else very soon.
About him. Forbes magazine has already been spotlighting Keith Lee, stating that he's the next big thing. And they're not talking about his size; they're talking about his in-ring talent.
I can definitely
see him ending up in TNA or WWE, sometime soon. He's a real force to be reckoned with. I mean, he's the Evolve champion, I believe. He's held gold in almost every promotion he's been in. And he's a guy to really look up, and it's going to be an honor to have him. Every week I'm pulling in these guys. You know what I mean? And they're coming in. They want to talk to us. They want me to interview them and everything. And he was definitely nice enough to sit there and say, yes, I would love to be on your show.
Well, Keith Lee's not the only one coming up. You got Jimmy Corderas too, I believe, former referee. That's coming up soon as well, right?
Jimmy Corderas, I'm going to have on Wednesday, April 26th. He's going to be coming on and discussing his new book, what got him into the profession of refereeing. We're going to talk about some backstage stories, some road stories, stuff like that, where he's been and where he sees the business at right now compared to when he initially started, as to whether or not it's getting better or whatever the case may be. And I apologize for everybody about not having Joe Gacy on Saturday. There was no communications. I don't know what was going on. He has not gotten back to me. We were supposed to have Aria Blake, who wrestles for Shine. She's a Shine Women's Champion. She's also wrestled for Ignite. She ended up having to work, so she couldn't be on the show. So, but we're in the process of getting people in, so everybody knows that. But this
right.
week
So in other words, basically, stay tuned with some good interviews coming up. Basically, we're getting more people on the show, and that's been something we haven't done in quite a while. We used to get people on the show ever so often and talk to them. And I know a lot of the fans react pretty well to interviews, to the interview shows. They usually find it interesting to hear about what got them into the sport and everything, the profession, and things of that nature. So it's always good to get some things in there, and getting some of these good up-and-comers that we've been getting so far has been great as well. Jimmy Corderas will be a welcome addition as well, having some good stories from the past and talking about refereeing, whereas, Teddy Long, when he was on with us, he didn't talk a lot about the referee aspect of it, but he did touch on it for a bit. So
right.
We got to go ahead and start
Well, before you do that, I just want to say, if anybody's got anybody they would like me to try to get on, you can email me at ray.btcspotlight@gmail.com and send me your emails. and let me know what you guys think or who you guys think I should try to get on, and I will work my hardest to do that. And tomorrow night we have our Raw recap show. I believe that will be Chris and I. I'm not sure if Mike will be able to make it. Mike?
Mike's not here. His phone dropped him again.
Oh. And then Tuesday we will have our SmackDown recap, both at 11. You want to stick it at 11:30 like we have been, Chris?
It'll have to be at the 11 Central, midnight Eastern time slot for my work schedule and everything to be able to do it and everything. So I'll have it set up. I'll have it set up for you for the midnight Eastern time slot on Monday and Tuesday both.
All right, and then Wednesday, don't forget to tune in at 3 p.m. Eastern time for my interview with one half of the Pretty Boy Killers, also known as Blackzilla, Keith Lee. I'll be interviewing him, so you guys can look forward to that. Chris?
Yes, well, we're about to go ahead and wrap things up here. We are actually over the time, which we've been doing quite a lot lately, but as we have found out, apparently we get the extra time slot there, or the extra time frame to finish things in. That's why we don't feel so rushed anymore. But, you guys, anyway, thanks for listening to the show. Be sure to follow us at Instagram and Facebook at bodyslamthecompetition.com. We are at Twitter at bodyslamthecomp. Make sure you follow us, support us in all the areas there. YouTube, bodyslamthecompetition.com is where you can find us there. That's where you upload all the videos to each week for you to go and do. Make sure you're a subscriber to us there and share us with your friends. Also, each week, as like we are tonight, we're on Blog Talk Radio. And I was just thinking, Ray, here on Blog Talk Radio, I've been kind of pushing people toward YouTube, and we appreciate you definitely following us at YouTube. But go ahead and push the follow button here at Blog Talk Radio as well. When you listen to the live or even the recorded version of it, there's going to be a follow button at the top you can click on. Some people have told me that they would follow already, but they didn't know how to do it. So in case you're not sure where to go to, look at the top of the page there where you're listening to, where the play button and everything is. There's the follow button up there as well. You can click on. It stands out, and you can follow us on that show and get an email message letting you know when we're on each time we come on and everything. That being said, Ray, we're going to go ahead and
follow us on everything.
There you go. Follow us everywhere. That being said, we're going to go ahead and go. Guys, thanks for tuning in this week and listening to us. And this week we're going to go ahead and start closing out with the intro song as well. So, Ray, we're going to wrap this up.
We will see you tomorrow night.
Mike is gone already. I will get with him in a minute. Thanks for all y'all for listening to us, and we'll see you tomorrow night on the Monday Night Raw recap.